I was in the newspaper, in the Arkadelphia, Arkansas newspaper, kind of like a prize turnip or something like that. When I was 7.5 months old, I weighed 30 pounds. Now, if you know anything about babies, that's giant.
Hello and welcome to the premiere of My Hollywood Story. I'm your host, Stacey Wilson-Hunt, and my guest is the Oscar-winning screenwriter and multi-Golden Globe-winning actor, Billy Bob Thornton, the star of Paramount Plus's hit drama series Landman, and the frontman for the band The Boxmasters. I was so lucky to film our conversation in front of a live audience at Nei House, Hollywood. I've been speaking to Billy for about 10 years now, and his Hollywood story is among the most wild, inspiring, and hilarious of any I've ever been lucky enough to hear. In fact, every time I sit down with him, he manages to reveal new, unexplored layers of himself. And this time was no different. Listen in as Billy reveals how he struggled with dyslexia and anxiety while growing up in rural Arkansas, why he battled so intensely with Harvey Weinstein over Sling Blade, why he thinks Landman has struck such a giant chord with audiences, and how grief has become his life's greatest gift. This is Billy Bob Thornton's Hollywood Story. My Hollywood Story is sponsored by Mattel Films and recorded at Nei House, Hollywood. If you like what you hear, give us a follow, leave a review, and let us know what you think. Everyone, please welcome my special guest, Billy Bob Thornton. How are you, sir? It's so nice to see you. And I know you're filming Landman Season 2, and you're so kind to fit this in your busy schedule. So thank you so much. Very appreciate it. Oh, anytime, really?
Anytime, Stacey.
Oh, that's so sweet. This is why I booked him. This is exactly why I booked him. So I last saw you in December. We were talking about Landman. And I wanted to know how you've been since then. Are you able to rest? Are you able to take time for your family and just sort of enjoy life without having to be so involved with work every single day of your life?
Well, between doing the show, which takes up about 5 months of the year, and making 2 records a year in the studio, touring with Boxmasters, and then a few months with the family, it's a pretty full year, but I feel blessed every day when I wake up, and it's like, well, I mean, look, if you're doing creative stuff that you love and you're able to take care of your family that way, who would ever complain? I'm not the guy who won't come out of his trailer.
You are dripping with gratitude, which is why I always love speaking to you. So thank you for that. But let's go way back to the beginning of your story, which began in Hot Springs, Arkansas.
Yikes.
And I wanted to know, I know loosely how you came to grow up in Arkansas, but how did your family ultimately settle there? What was their story?
My father's family originally, because we traced all this back, and I've done the DNA test and the whole thing, and I am about 78 or 79% pure English. So I'm, as we call ourselves, teabags. And my daughter Bella, she said to me one day after I did this DNA thing, right? She said, "Daddy, why are we randomly 11% Swiss?" And I was like, "I don't know. I've never met a Swiss person other than Mark Forster." So they go way back over there. My family came here in 1699, from what we've found out. My dad's family were from the Lancashire area, like Liverpool. No wonder I love the Beatles. And my mom's family were from Yorkshire, so that was the War of the Roses. And there was a lot of fighting in the house. So, and then they ended up in Alabama, eventually came to Arkansas. And I was born in Hot Springs because they didn't have a hospital in Alpine. Was raised in a town of 110 people. We had no running water or electricity until I was about 9. This is why I take exception when people say, these overprivileged Hollywood, it's like, okay, yeah, I wish you'd been there.
I agree with you. It's very misplaced.
It's kind of weird, you know.
It is.
But, and then, you know, grew up there in Arkansas playing music and playing baseball, and came to California. I moved to Houston after high school and came to California from that to play music. And the hair band scene was happening. And somebody said, come to my acting class. I think you can do this. And next thing you know, I got a little one scene on Matlock or something. I was like, I just made $361 in one day. I'm going to do this for a little while.
Wait, you just cruised past a lot of years, Billy. I heard you say that you were the fattest baby in Clark County. Is this true? How fat are we talking?
Okay, now this is crazy because I grew up. I mean, a lot of people who saw me on like Tombstone or things like that, they think, "Oh, he was a fat guy at one point," but that's actually not true. I gained weight because this is back when I was going full-on method, and for U-turn, Tombstone, a few of those. For U-turn, I gained 60 pounds, and after I did that, somewhere in the mid-90s, I just said, "I'm never doing this again." So I weigh right now 145, which is what I weighed as a senior in high school. And I was a skinny kid, always was. But when I was a baby, I was gigantic.
Like, how heavy were you when you were born?
I was in the newspaper, in the Arkadelphia, Arkansas newspaper, kind of like a prize turnip or something like that. And when I was 7.5 months old, I weighed 30 pounds. Now, if you know anything about babies, that's giant. Yeah.
I am shocked to hear that figure, Billy. That is overwhelming.
I ate sticks of butter like they were payday candy bars. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So jumping ahead a few years, what is your earliest memory of feeling like you were a storyteller? Because I have to imagine you were always creative, you were always dreaming. But when did you find yourself thinking, oh, I have really interesting ideas, and you were able to entertain yourself?
Well, I mean, like I said, I grew up as a music kid. I didn't know anything about movies. We had one little movie theater in Malvern, Arkansas, the big town we moved to. And I didn't know anything about acting or movies or anything like that. I was just in rock and roll bands as a kid, but I wrote songs. And I got in drama class in high school because I thought maybe I could at least squeak a C out of something. And
were you not a good student?
No, God, no.
I know you struggled with dyslexia. That must have been an issue for you.
Yeah. Okay. Anxiety disorder, OCD, and dyslexia all wrapped up into one. And so when I was in this drama class, I used to write short stories while the teacher was, talking about, whatever, Shakespeare or Cinderella or whatever it was. And one day she said to me, you seem to be interested in something other than this class. What are you doing? And I told her that I was writing this story. And she said, well, why don't you pick some students from the class and I'm going to let you direct a play of your short story on the stage. And I liked it, It ended up being pretty cool.
What was the story about? Do you remember?
Yes, it was about an old couple in a Kmart, and just all the things they saw on this weird day they had in a Kmart. And her name was Maudie Treadway, the drama teacher, and she said, "I think you can do this," but I didn't think about it.
So that's interesting. Instead of castigating you, she saw something in you, maybe your skills are better shifted over here as opposed to sending you to the principal's office.
Yeah.
That's really a gift that she gave you.
It was a great gift. And so, yeah, I was actually a pallbearer at her funeral because she was the only teacher that ever really encouraged me. The rest of them just said I was a moron. But see, back then, they didn't know about anxiety and OCD and dyslexia. I mean, we didn't have groups and support and things like that.
They just thought you were misbehaving.
They just thought I was an idiot, which, and believe me, I was, but in other ways.
But you're saying there wasn't the communication and the vernacular that we have now to identify in children.
Right.
Maybe they
That's
need
exactly
extra help.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
This was the country.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, we didn't know about that.
And I know baseball figured very prominently for you, and you did have dreams of playing baseball. Was that something you pursued actively?
Oh, yeah. I was kind of a local high school baseball hero there in Arkansas and won my game at the All-Star tournament when I was a senior. And for anybody who knows baseball, my senior year I went 8-1 and led the league in strikeouts and averaging about 10 strikeouts a game. And one game I struck out 17, which was pretty darn good at that time. I was a junk pitcher. I didn't throw really hard, but I threw a lot of junk. And then I was scouted by the Kansas City Royals and went to their camp, got my collarbone broken, and I'd been there like a half an hour. And So, but I think it was a blessing, you know, I mean, because let's say I'd made it to the minor leagues with the Royals or whoever, and maybe washed out, maybe made it all the way through, maybe gone up to the majors for a year or two. I would have been retired now for about, 85 years?
That's a young man's game.
I'd be selling cars in Long Beach right now. So I think.
Which sounds like a character you'd be playing in a show, actually.
But yeah, I was either just going to be in a rock and roll band or play baseball, and acting was just kind of an accident.
I'd like to say a very special thank you to Nei House for being the exclusive venue partner of My Hollywood Story. Nei House is a gorgeous private work and social space for creators, innovators, and thought leaders to connect in Los Angeles and New York. As a Nei House member myself, I can tell you firsthand how amazing it is to work inside such iconic, beautifully designed buildings, while also enjoying elevated hospitality and thought-provoking cultural experiences. To me, Nei House has completely redefined the ideal environment for creative potential and progress. To learn more and apply for membership, visit noihouse.com. So when you moved to LA, was that to pursue music and not really necessarily acting? Okay.
No, only music. I had no idea that I would ever become an actor at all.
Okay. And at what point did you meet Tom Epperson, your soon-to-be writing partner?
We were neighbors when I was a kid. Tom Epperson lived in this giant house, and his dad was the county judge. And he actually got me out of trouble a couple of times.
That's a good friendship to have.
Yeah, let's just say it involves some stems and seeds. But
not gardening related, I have a feeling.
And so Tom was 4 years older than I was, and but our yard, his yard, big yard, adjoined our tiny yard, and he and the older kids used to let me play football with them every now and then when they needed a center. So, yeah.
And so you and Tom ultimately settled here in LA together.
Tom said, I want to go to LA to be a writer, because Tom actually ended up being a teacher at the University of Arkansas, and he taught English, and he wrote poetry. He'd written a novel, all this kind of stuff. He wanted to be a screenwriter. And he said, why don't you go out there with me? And I did. And we went to San Diego first. We kind of snuck up here. But ended up sleeping under a pool table in my cousin's house in Rialto. But there are so many stories that it's like, hell.
They're all perfect, too, by the way. You cannot go wrong. Under the pool table.
Any given week, I could tell you something that seems like a lifetime. But anyway.
You guys settled in Culver City and on Motor Avenue, correct?
Motor Avenue, between where Fox starts, and then back then it was MGM still.
Right.
So I thought that was a sign. You know, it's like, I live between Fox and MGM. It must be a sign.
It must be a sign.
Yeah.
And did you start acting? Did you just decide to start auditioning?
I met a guy named Jeff Lester who was in this acting class. He was the guy that knew someone that Tom knew from back home. And he was actually on a TV show. And, you know, it's like, wow, you're on a TV show. I thought he was like Marlon Brando, you know. And he said, I think you should come to my acting class. I think you have the personality for this kind of thing. And I said, oh, all right. I didn't know anything about it. We had it every Wednesday night, and then we went to Barney's Beanery after class. And that's back when it was a real joint. I mean, it wasn't like where the hip people go. It was like, you know, you'd get in a fight in there easy. And but yeah, Jeff got me in there, and the teacher's name was John Whitlock, another guy who inspired me. And there's a story, the actual story of how I became an actor is way too long to tell here, but it was in that class the first time I went there. I'm sorry, the second time I went there.
And how were you received in this class? And were people like, who is this guy? He's never acted before. He has this accent. Like, how do we use him, right?
I mean, honestly, I liked the class because at that time, I'm not interested in this type of thing anymore. I've been with my wife for 23 years. At that time, I was very interested in certain people in the class, and it kept me there. And but I didn't know what to do, and the teacher said to me, well, if you want to join this class, you have to do a scene or a monologue and let me see and see if I think this is something you should do. I didn't know what to do, sleeping, you know, under the pool table in Rialto with my cousins, and I found one of Tom's Shakespeare books. I don't know shit about Shakespeare. And but I'd heard of some of it, and I started reading Othello, and I thought, what if I did like Andy Griffith used to do it when he did his comedy records about Romeo and Juliet and all this stuff? You're shaking your head like, you know that stuff, right? It's really hilarious. So he would just tell these stories, classic stories, but he did them in this funny kind of way, playing a regular guy doing it instead of, the fancy stuff. I went into the class the next week because I didn't know anybody to do a scene with, so I went in there and did this scene by myself, and I did Othello, but I played every character, and I told it from Iago's point of view from his cell, his jail cell. And he was called Iago the Redneck, and it started out by me saying, let me tell y'all how this all started, all right? And then Cassio was a different kind of guy. He was a very sort of feminine kind of guy. And then Desdemona was a valley girl, and Othello was kind of a street guy, And I played each one of them. And after 45 minutes, John Whitlock, the teacher, stopped me, and he said, listen, how much more of this is there? And I said, I don't know. I'm making it up. I didn't write it up. I didn't write it down. And so he said, well, okay, well, other people have to do stuff tonight. So, but next week I want you to come back and finish this. And so you got to sit down. So I sat down. And the next week I came back and I finished it and did probably another half hour on it. And after the class, he called me outside. He said, I want to talk to you after class. I thought I was in trouble. And he said, you never come near Crossroads of the World again as long as you live. And he said, I've never had anybody in my class who I thought would have a trophy in their hand someday. He said, you need to do this. And he said, I don't know who you are or where the hell you came from or what that was. But he said, just so you know, from now on, scenes and monologues are supposed to be from 3 to 5 minutes long. And so that was, the start of it. And then people started seeing me do that kind of crap. And then I joined a thing called the West Coast Ensemble, which is a theater group, which started out in Cahuenga, ended up on El Centro, and ultimately was on Argyle and Hollywood Boulevard there in this bigger building. And I did one-act plays there, and people saw me because I was a horrible auditioner. So most of the casting directors and people that saw me doing that stuff. And I started doing a one-man show, and in that one-man show was the character from Sling Blade.
Wow. Yeah. Before we talk about Sling Blade, of course, I do want to mention One False Move, the movie that you wrote with Tom, which is excellent Southern noir, directed by Carl Franklin, one of my favorite directors. First of all, how did you get the financing to make this movie?
Yeah, I mean, another long story. I don't know how to tell. I mean,
well, did you have an agent who was then helping you make this movie and helping you get financing?
We had an agent,
okay.
And the reason we had an agent was because I met an actor, an African-American guy named Don Blakely, who was a New York actor. And the reason I met him is because Tom and I worked at a mail receiving center at the corner of Crescent Heights and Sunset, right next to Greenblatt's Deli.
I love all the directions he's giving in these stories, too. We love, Californians love directions. I love knowing where all this is taken.
Yeah, take the 405 to the 10 to the, yeah. And so,
love it or hate it, we're all Californians now. We've lived here
yes,
too
we
long.
are. Well, I've been in California since 1980, so I'm a Californian most of my life here. But the thing is, remember the Thomas Guide, anybody?
Oh, yes.
Anyway, so I was the answering service for people who wanted a Sunset Boulevard address. And Tom was a mail guy, put the stuff in the slots, and people had mailboxes there. Don Blakely would come in there. He started talking to us. He was an actor. He introduced us to a girl named Brooke Simon, who worked for some Australian or South African or something movie company. And she knew a woman named Mary Cross, who was a literary agent with Susan Smith, which was called Smith Friedman at the time. They were a pretty decent agency. And Susan Smith signed me and Tom on as writers, but and we'd written a couple of screenplays, and we had eventually that one, and they sent it around to a bunch of people, and Eventually, there was a company at the time called RCA Columbia. A guy named Larry Estes ran it, and he wanted to finance it. And there was a company called IRS Media, because there was IRS Records. And, Miles Copeland ran it, Stuart Copeland from the Police, his brother. And we made this movie for, $2 or $3 million, something like that. And that's how the financing came about, was because Susan Smith's power got the script to someone.
And I've never had a chance to ask you this, but how did it feel to be shooting in Arkansas, a movie that you wrote and you're also starring in? That must have felt surreal.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it really did. But I didn't think much about it. I wasn't really. I wasn't that ambitious, really. I just knew how to write crazy stories, and thought, yeah, this is cool. And I didn't really come to love being an actor until around that time. Somewhere between there and Sling Blade is when I thought, you know what, I actually do love doing this. I just didn't know much about it. Because, from the most of the 80s, I was pissed off that I wasn't, on the road playing music, No.
And maybe it's because acting wasn't your first love.
Right.
You didn't have as much invested, and you weren't sort of beating yourself up about, I didn't get that role. It was sort of secondary in a way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of sometimes, how they smell desperation. Well, I wasn't desperate.
Maybe that's why they liked you.
I mean, maybe. I was desperate for money because I was broke all the time. But
you weren't that sort of over-eager acting student.
No, I was never that kind of guy. I just did. I mean, I still, as an actor, I'm the same now as I was in 1985. I mean, it's never really changed. I try to play things naturally and just don't really think about it. And I mean, I can put it this way. I've never seen a really bad actor be made excellent through studying with anybody, the Meisners or the whoever they are. But although I used to put that on my resume, then you studied with all these people. I never met them, For some reason, that meant something. So I thought,
and also, they're not going to fact check because there was no internet back then.
Exactly. Yeah, you could get by with a lot of stuff back then. Yeah, and
so I want to talk about around this time you were getting some sitcom work, which was fun to revisit. Evening Shade and Hearts of Fire were two sitcoms in the early '90s. And on Hearts of Fire, you would meet someone who had become a very good friend of yours, John Ritter, and I think we all miss him still. Yeah. What is your favorite memory of working with John on the sitcom, and how did this relate? It seems like kind of an odd couple relationship from the outside, but what did you connect over? Because he seemed like so lovely, but he seemed like a really silly, blatantly comedic actor.
Right.
So how did you guys connect, and what's your favorite memory from that show?
John and I met shortly before I did Hearts of Fire with him. I'd done 3 episodes of Evening Shade with Burt Reynolds, and Burt was very good to me and really was a champion for me at that time. He and a producer named Fred Roos were the 2 guys who really were behind me. Well, these sitcoms were done by Harry Thomason and Linda Blower Thomason.
Who were actually writing stories about Southern people and actually casting Southern people.
Exactly.
And even just rewatching these shows, it's jarring to hear actors with Southern accents in a sitcom. It just barely happens anymore. It's very, very unique.
It's very true. I think the accent, the American accent's all coming into one now because of social media. Like kids in Atlanta now sound like kids in Minnesota. But one way or the other, Harry and Linda let me do this little part on Evening Shade, and Burt said, I like this kid, And
well, he was a Florida guy. He knew people like you.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And then Harry and Linda, because of what I did on Evening Shade, they put me in Hearts of Fire with John and Marky Post and Ed Asner and all these people. And so John, what I found out about him right away, everybody looked at him as like Jack Tripper from Three's Company, right? But he was really a great actor. And they always thought that John would be squeaky clean and drink milk, and he wasn't a dark guy at all. Well, he had one of the darkest senses of humor I've ever been around. And at one point, I was with one person who I lived with for a period of time, and then ended up with another person who I ended up marrying. And when I went to his house the day that the media was chasing me all over town, I was supposed to go see him that day over at his place up off of Coldwater. And he opened the door in a bathrobe, and he goes, "Nice trade." I was like, "Wow, that's dark, dude." Anyway, but he would do things on the set, and you're saying a moment that when I was like, okay, this guy. When you're doing a sitcom, you're in front of a live audience, you're all nerved up and stuff, and Linda wrote a lot of dialogue, and sometimes you would have a monologue, a whole page long and in front of a live audience. I do it on Landman, but, you can
You're not in front of an audience.
You're not in front of an audience. And so one day we're doing the show before this live audience, and I had a phone call that was a very lengthy phone call. And so I had put the page down on the desk, because we worked in this office, right? So the page is down on the desk by the phone, so I could just essentially kind of, this is back when I could see that far. And so I could just read it off of there and kind of act like I'm just looking at my pencil holder or whatever. And so then they call action on the first take of this scene. Here's a live audience. And I went over, picked up the phone, and looked down, and my paper had been replaced with another paper, just with someone who had drawn somebody giving the finger. So John had taken up my dialogue and given me the finger. So
now I see why you were friends.
Yeah.
That explains a lot.
yeah, he was pretty good at that stuff.
And of course, you'd worked with him in Sling Blade and Bad Santa, and
Yes.
worth revisiting the movies just to see him. Just extraordinary performances.
This episode of My Hollywood Story is brought to you by the Starz drama series Outlander. Katrina Balfe and Sam Heughan star in the romantic fantasy epic and long-running fan phenomenon. Outlander, for your Emmy consideration for Outstanding Drama Series and streaming now on the Starz app.
Speaking of Sling Blade, 1996, written and directed by you, of course. And I was revisiting Down and Dirty Pictures, one of my favorite books about independent film, written by Peter Biskin. And I revisited the section about Sling Blade, and what he talked about was so true, which was Sling Blade almost overnight changed the way Hollywood perceived acquisitions, because the indie business was still very scant back then. And of course, Miramax landed the deal for $10 million. And there were many discussions, I'll use the word discussions, between you and Harvey Weinstein behind the scenes. And discussions can mean anything. But I do want to know, when he was asking you to trim the movie, what do you remember about those debates with him? And did you actually end up cutting in the end? Because I know that final cut was very important to you.
Yes. You mean on Sling Blade?
Yes, on Sling Blade.
Okay, a company financed it out of New York called the Shooting Gallery. It's just a bunch of kids whose dads were lawyers. They used their credit cards. That's how we made Sling Blade.
And it was what was the budget?
980,000.
980,000. Okay, which is very cheap.
Yes.
Very cheap. Okay.
And we didn't even have a transportation department. We changed clothes on the set.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty cheap.
The ultimate indie film.
Yeah, and I thought maybe my mom and some of her friends would see it or something, but we didn't have any idea that it was going to happen that way. But yes, he did ask me to cut it because he was known for doing that. And the problem is I'd made my contract with the Shooting Gallery and I already had Final Cut.
Right.
So he couldn't force me to do it. The words I gave Harvey when he told me, you little shit, whatever, I'll kill you and all this stuff.
Sounds like him.
Yeah, whatever he said. My reply was 3 words, and one of them has to do with what I'm sitting on. Yeah. Yeah. So he and I argued the whole time. I was under contract to those guys as a director for 10 years. Wow. And at a certain point, I didn't direct another movie, just waiting for them to dissolve the company. Yeah, but then All the Pretty Horses was a whole other story, and that's the one where we had our big fights.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of contentiousness.
Yeah.
But I have to imagine when you were on the Oscar stage in 1997, when you won Best Adapted Screenplay, that must have felt very good. And did Harvey ever say congratulations to you?
Oh yeah, he's over the moon. I mean,
Okay.
because he was all about.
So by then he was like,
getting
oh, of
awards.
course I knew this movie was worth $10 million. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. No, and to their credit at the time, if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have had the money behind it to market the movie and get it even seen by anybody.
Well, he felt he overpaid for it. And that's what I was reading, is that he kind of felt like
Oh, yeah.
he had invested too much, but of course it was best money he could have spent.
Yeah, I mean, these days, I mean, to this date, I think worldwide it's made somewhere between like 180 and 200 million dollars or something.
Right.
And somehow is it the red or the black that's bad?
I think it's black, red.
Red? Red is bad. To this day, it's in the red. Anyway, but we sold it outright to them, and then I split the $10 million thing with the shooting gallery, and they said, "Do you understand what just happened?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Miramax, they're cool, right?" And it's like, "Yeah, yeah." And you do know that you just made $5 million. I mean, I never dreamed I'd have like $5,000. And the next thing you
Was
know,
it hard to absorb that reality?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's still hard to absorb it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, my first job was hauling hay. And then I worked at a sawmill, a machine shop. I hauled heavy equipment like bulldozers and backhoes. And worked at a screen door factory, Shakey's Pizza in Marina Del Rey, and Mar Vista, technically. And but
We need Billy Bob's Guide to LA. With all the like landmarks of your
Yeah,
whole career,
exactly right.
like where everything took place. I'm not kidding. I need to see this.
yeah, it'd be pretty weird. But yeah, I mean, to this day, I swear I'm not trying to be Mr. Humble guy, but I keep that in my back pocket all the time. You know, I never forget where I came from and what it took to get where I am, which I'm not sure how it happened, but it did. And so I appreciate every minute of it, and I really don't have regrets. I mean, I got a couple, but, you know, everybody's got some.
I would say you're due a few. It's fine. Yeah. And I'd like to talk about Tombstone for a minute, because it reunited you with your friend Bill Paxton, whom we also miss a lot, Sam Elliott, Kurt Russell, and then, of course, Val Kilmer, who we just lost recently. Yes. But before we talk about Val, I have to say Kurt Russell really slapped the shit out of you in that scene in the saloon. Did that hurt?
Movie magic. Now, it's not that I haven't had the shit slapped out of me in a movie.
Well, you knew where to go inside because you knew what that felt like.
I knew exactly what that felt like. The way we did that, you know, giving away the little secret of it, I was wearing.
I think we're good. No spoilers. It's been
right.
a while.
It has been a while, yes. But I was wearing a derby hat, and it was pretty tight, you know, because once again, this is when I decided to drink 3 Haagen-Dazs milkshakes before I went to bed so I could gain weight and be a real actor, you know. And so I'm wearing this derby hat, and I had a blood capsule in my lip. And Kurt and I worked out this thing. He goes, "What if I hit you on the brim of your hat? You'll feel when that is. That way you know exactly when I'm hit." So Kurt was hitting the brim of that hat. And because it was so tight on my head, it didn't move. So that's how I knew when to turn, and I popped the blood capsule at the same time, and that's how that worked out. But I actually saw in a soap opera one time, this is no joke, some girl slapped a guy in a scene on a soap opera, and she slapped him like this, and he went like that. I'll never forget. I mean, I was watching this on TV live. You know, it wasn't like now a meme or whatever. You know, this was real.
And do you have any favorite memories of working with Val Kilmer? One of my favorite performances of his, just visceral adaptation of that character.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tombstone became kind of an iconic thing, and everybody who had even little parts to big parts in it, you know, to this day they all ask you about it. And Val did an amazing job in that. Val and I got in a fight, not a fist fight, but a fight. I had been in a movie that he starred in for HBO where I just had a couple of scenes years before, so I knew him a little bit. But one day he did something that I didn't like, and he and I got in a fight.
This was on the set of Tombstone?
Yes.
Okay.
And I was on a lot of Vicodin because I had 6 broken ribs at the time. I'd just come off a movie where I was in a horse wreck where I had a cracked pelvis, 6 broken ribs, and a broken collarbone. So when I was on Tombstone, they just doped me up and said, walk through all those longhorn steers. I said, can I walk beside them? Because I'm already pretty messed up here. And we had some words. And then I saw him in New York about a year and a half later or so. And he came up to me, he goes, man, somebody told me you don't like me. I said, I like you fine, Val. And he said, well, yeah, but there was that time when that's just stuff that happens. He said, well, man, I always liked you, and I was hoping you'd like me, and, I didn't know. I'm sorry about, that time. And I said, no, we're good. Don't worry about it. And then for a while, like within the business, not in the public, but the whole thing was about how Val Kilmer and I had something against each other, and it really was never true. Val was a sweet guy. He really was. And
well, he was sensitive. He was a real actor.
He was a very sensitive guy, and I liked him very much. I was so sad when he got sick. Yeah.
I think we all felt that, and what a loss. So I want to jump ahead to one of my favorite movies, not necessarily one we identify with just you, but just one that I love watching, which is Primary Colors, 1998, directed by Mike Nichols and written by Elaine May. Right. What an amazing reunion. And of course, this was Joe Klein's very thinly veiled adaptation of the events of the Clinton campaign. Yeah. And you played the James Carville-esque Richard Gemmons. I have to know, what was it like not only working with Mike, but to see him working with Elaine on set together? That's a time in history I wish I could project myself to be there to watch that. What was that like?
Well, it was amazing, and because every day, not only were we being directed by Mike Nichols, one of the most famous guys as a director ever, and just a witty, intelligent guy, but then he's got Elaine May, his old comedy partner, who's written the script, and they're standing next to each other by the monitors every day, and we got to hear them talk to each other, which was kind of like their old comedy routine, and we got to be, face to face with that. And I have to say, Mike was, he became a father figure to people when you worked with him. He really did.
He cared so much about actors.
He did, loved actors, and he never would say, cut when you screwed something up. He did something that was even worse. And I told him about it. I said, man, that hurts. If you screwed something up, one day I didn't have my tie on. Now, technically, that's not my fault because it's wardrobe, but in fairness to them, they said, do you want us to put it on or do you want to put it on? I said, oh, that's okay. Just leave it in the trailer. I'll put it on. And, of course, we're halfway through a take that was working, and then the script supervisor noticed I didn't have my tie on. I'd left it in the trailer. And Mike from back there, when he heard this, he just instead of yelling or cutting and coming out and saying, what the hell's going on here, he just said, oh, come on. And it's like,
that's worse than anything.
It's like, it was, oh yeah. And, but yeah.
That's like someone saying, I'm very disappointed in you.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, no, it was pretty funny. But
and he was known for really wanting a lot of rehearsals, and he also
Yes.
did not want you ad-libbing. Was that a hard adjustment, either of those?
Not ad-libbing is always a hard adjustment for me. Not rehearsing is good for me also. I don't like to rehearse. So both of those things, yeah. Before we started the movie, we sat in a little conference room at Universal, and for about 2 or 3 weeks, we just talked about the movie, talked about the script, before we ever even started rehearsing or anything. So he was very, very thorough. Yeah.
And he came from theater, where you had a lot of time to really ruminate and get to know each other.
Yeah.
Again, what a huge loss. We miss him too. And I want, of course, to talk about Monsters Ball, 2001, a movie that is still just a gut punch to revisit. And we've talked about this movie before. Your character, Hank Grotowski, who works as a corrections officer, you told me once, quote, I was essentially playing my own father in this movie. And I wanted to know, did that make it easier for you to access that or more difficult?
I didn't know I was playing my own father till I saw it. Yeah.
How did it feel to see that?
It was very, chilling. The second I started watching that movie and saw my posture, the way I walked, the way I looked, it's like, oh my God, I just channeled my dad. I never set out to do it, but that's what I was doing. And I have to say, the people in that movie, Mark Forster is a great director, and everybody.
And that was Lee Daniels producing
Lee
too.
Daniels
Was
produced
one of his
it.
first big movies.
Yes. And everybody in it was just ideal. And Heath Ledger, God rest Heath.
What was the toughest day on set in that shoot?
The day that I had to beat Heath up in the bathroom, because Heath came to me and he said, I don't want you to hold back. He goes, I want to be old school like you guys used to do it, And I hit him really hard several times. And to where it brought tears to his eyes, but he wanted it, so we did it. These days you kind of can't do that, because you got to fill out forms and shit, and then HR comes over and,
Or you just safety supervisor watching every move.
Oh, I got a rib broken last year, some torn muscles on Landman. I didn't fill anything out, but then, me and another guy ran into each other once in this thing accidentally, and it was barely touched. And the next thing you know, he's like a younger actor, and he's like filling all kinds of shit out and stuff. And I'm like, come on. Anyway, like Mike Nichols, right? Oh, come on.
Toughen up.
But yeah, you know who the original person that they were going to put in that part
in Heath's
that
role?
everybody wanted? No, not for Heath. For Hallie's part.
Oh no, I actually don't.
Hallie had a meeting with me and Mark Forster at Sunset Marquee, and she convinced us that she was a person for the part. We thought she was too pretty to play the part, because why would she be in that small town?
Well, she's battled that her whole career.
Absolutely.
Right.
A lot, and I have other friends who have also, gone through that. And I never had that problem. But anyway, it's like,
You're lucky, Billy.
Get that ugly son of a bitch. He'll do it, But anyway, so one way or the other, Hallie really wanted this part, and she came in and she convinced us. The passion she had for that part. And she said, I won't wear any makeup, I'll be down and everything. But the original person that Mark and everybody involved was talking about was Alfre Woodard, who was, that was the idea originally. Mm-hmm.
And she would have done a beautiful job too,
She
just
would
very
have been,
different.
She would have been
very
awesome. Alfre's a great actress.
But really speaks to, you got to go promote yourself. And the fact that Hallie met with both of you, and look at how it turned out for her.
Yeah.
That was her Oscar. And I'd like to talk again about Bad Santa. Also because I love John Ritter, but because Bad Santa is the most ridiculous movie I've ever seen, and is just a masterpiece. So when you were making this movie with Terry Zwigoff, the amazing director, were you cognizant that for some people you were playing almost like a spiritual icon? It's almost like you're playing Jesus and desecrating this character for people. Was that a concern at all? Certainly wasn't for me, but I'm wondering, because Santa does mean a lot to people, were you worried about that?
Right. Well, the movie has become iconic. And at the time, Geyer, my manager of 35 years, he didn't come out here and sit with us. He's in there watching it on TV. He's too fancy to come in here.
He's watching the live feed.
That's right. But anyway, Geyer sent me the script. He goes, he talked me into Monsters Ball and Bad Santa. So
it's a good
that's
manager.
why you keep a guy around. But anyway, he said, you got to do this. He explained it to me, and I said, that sounds awful. I can't do that. And he sent me the
You were
script.
worried about the holiday kind of it being too dark.
I was worried about it being so profane.
Okay.
And, not like in real life I'm not, but I just was worried about it for audiences. And he sent me the script. He said, just read it. I read about a third of it. I called him. I said, I got to do this. I must do this movie. I laughed on every page. And it was like I couldn't believe how funny. And it started a trend. There had never been a movie like that. And the next thing you know, there's like bad grandma, bad grandpa, bad teachers, bad this guy, bad next door neighbor, And so,
you created this whole prototype.
the whole prototype.
We thank you so much for that.
Oh yeah, but it was a great experience making the movie.
It looked like a lot of fun, and that little boy, I don't
was.
know where he is now. I'm sure he's all
He's
grown
around.
up.
He looks exactly the same, only like somebody put an air hose in him and just aired him up. Yeah. But he's from Vancouver, Canada, Brett. Oh, yeah, he's a great
what
kid.
What a heartbreaking performance, though. He was so talented.
He was awesome. And then in Bad Santa, too, which nobody saw.
I saw
because,
it.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. The political climate at that time when it came out was don't ever say anything that might offend somebody. So how the hell are you going to put a movie like that out?
You're not.
And so it's even more profane than the first one. And Kathy Bates, who I was just with about an hour ago.
And she played your mom in Bad
Santa. Played my mom, yeah.
That like timeline-wise, I'm not sure how that works out. But
but it's movies,
It's movies.
But I mean, look at Bonanza. You have a 50-year-old father and 3 47-year-old sons. So
suspension of disbelief, we call that.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about, it's sort of a milestone. It's been about 10 or 11 years since I would say you entered your peak TV era. First, Fargo on FX. Yes, one of my favorites. Goliath on Prime Video, and of course, now Landman. But you once told me about doing TV and doing Fargo that you had come from a generation of actors who didn't think TV was cool.
Yes.
So this wasn't a natural segue for you.
No.
And obviously you'd worked with the Coens on The Man Who Wasn't There, so you had kind of the blueprint of what Noah Hawley was trying to do with the show. But how scared were you to jump into Fargo? Did you think, oh, my movie career is going to be kind of over if I do this?
Well, yeah, first of all, you're right. I mean, when I was coming up, if you did a TV show, it meant your career was ending or it was just beginning. And so we just didn't do TV, I've never done a commercial. I mean, it's really like.
Have you been asked to do commercials?
Oh, yeah.
And you've passed on all of
that? I can't do it. I auditioned for 2 commercials. And Paul Ventura, who was a great casting director, he did a lot of commercials, and he called me in to do a couple of auditions, and I just would freeze up and go. I mean, it's like, I don't know how you do that.
Like pretending to endorse something.
Yeah, I don't get it. I can't. When my butt hurts, I use Preparation H. I mean, it's like I just don't get it.
By the way, that was great.
Well, I can do it here, but I couldn't do it there. Well, one way or the other. So I always thought Frank Zappa should have done Preparation H commercials.
Feels very him. It feels very him.
But we didn't do TV, and when it started becoming popular, I guess like The Sopranos and different things.
Yeah, I think Glenn Close doing Damages for me, and that was FX. Right. That wasn't even premium TV. Exactly. That fell in Holly Hunter also doing basic cable. That for me was like 07, 08 when suddenly all these Oscar-winning or Oscar-nominated acters were suddenly doing television. It's pretty extraordinary.
They knew something that we didn't know yet, evidently, because now everybody wants to be in streaming. Nobody wants to do movies. It's like, you got to rely on the box office, and they only make, movies about superheroes and stuff, And now, streaming, you get to develop a character of over 10 episodes. And what director ever said, I want my movie to be shorter, So it's great. And the reason we didn't like TV was because it was censored. So you couldn't be realistic in a TV show because you can't show actual violence or actual sex or use language or whatever. You couldn't do anything that was like real life. You had to do at it. And
it's really just HBO that was doing anything sort
HBO
of cutting edge.
HBO was about the only one at the time, yeah. And then, of course, they had The Sopranos, and they had different ones. I was offered one way before I did Fargo that they actually made kind of for me.
Which was what?
I can't say because you never want to. Here's the one thing you don't want to do with actors. You don't ever want to say to somebody who made something out of something,
I had that first.
They wrote that for me, and now... I guess you were like second choice or whatever. So
that's very gentlemanly of you, though. Yeah. Not everybody.
I would never say that unless we're all hanging out in the lobby. Then I'll tell you. But
I'm going to find out someday, Billy.
But one way or the other, it's a very popular show that people love very much, and they wrote it for me. So anyway, but I didn't do that. Okay. And Geyer said to me, "You're an idiot. I don't understand why you're not doing this. You don't understand the future of this stuff, and you can do whatever you want in this." And So then Fargo came along, and I met with Noah Hawley, and I read the pilot script of the first season of that, and he said
That pilot is insane.
It's
one of
insane.
the best episodes of
insane.
TV I've seen in years.
Oh, yeah.
It's
I read it
extraordinary.
and I was like, got to do it, And I said, okay, now I'm starting to get this. So I did the first season of Fargo, knowing that each season it's going to be a different cast and a different.
And
thing.
Noah, I think being a novelist before writing for TV, reading his scripts, I haven't read them, but I have to imagine they felt novelistic in that sense.
Yes, for sure.
Right.
And he managed to, do something that kept the spirit of the Coen's movie, and yet make a new thing too. And I loved it, loved every minute of doing it. And after that, I was like, okay. And then when they came to me with Goliath, I met with David Kelly and all those guys, and once again, I read it, and it was kind of like, well, that was kind of written for me, huh? And then I found out it was actually no, I was on the other end of the deal. It was
so you're getting
actually
too big for your britches over here.
Somebody else. Goliath was supposed to be another guy, and but they couldn't work out a deal, or the timing was wrong, or something like that. He didn't do it, and that's how I ended up in Goliath. And of course, they were like, "We always had you in mind for this." It's like, I have the same agent as this guy. I already know. So don't bullshit me like that, But anyway, I'll put it this way: his last name starts with a C. His first name starts with a K. But anyway, so yeah, that's how I ended up in Goliath. And then,
Yes.
When Taylor, I'd done a cameo for Taylor in 1883. He said, "I'm writing a show for you in your voice."
Right. And he
to
actually
Neil
meant that
Douglas.
he was writing
He
the
was.
show for you.
He was.
So
And
that's a perfect segue. We come to Landman now.
I get it now.
Yes. And of course, premiered last year, and it reached 15 million households globally in the first 4 weeks. That is huge, absolutely huge. So obviously, Taylor had written this with you in mind. You had also done a cameo in one of his other shows in 1883. What spoke to you on a larger level about this character? It's a very unique job. A lot of people don't know about this job. It's a very important job. And it's a very dangerous job. So tell me what interested you, not only those aspects, but his internal mechanism that you wanted to tap into.
Well, first of all, like you said, we haven't really seen behind the curtain of the oil business in Texas, or anywhere for that matter. And I mean, until since like Giant, with
Or Dallas.
or Dallas, but
To a lesser degree.
But then again, Dallas is like it's kind of a soap opera.
That was a soap opera, yes.
And but I loved the movie Giant, and when I read this at first, when Taylor sent me the first couple of them, it was like, well, this can be Giant with cursing, and but it was so well written, and I thought, well, we're going to show people this world, and it doesn't have an agenda. It's just saying this is how it works. If you're in this world, this is what it is. This is how people behave. This is how they think. This is how the other people think. This is how these people think. And I liked that about it. And I loved the character because I like playing people who, generally I like people who are on sort of the underbelly of life. I enjoy playing those more. Tombstone's a perfect example. If you're doing a movie about Wyatt Earp, don't play Wyatt Earp, play Doc Holliday.
Right.
Right.
And also, people who are underestimated seem to be a thread in your work, too.
Yes. Like in A Simple Plan, I was the first person cast in it, and John Borman was the original director.
Wow.
Ended up being Sam Raimi, and they wanted me to play the part that Bill ended up playing.
Oh, you had the much better role.
And, well, John Borman said, I want to have lunch with you and ask you something. Would you mind, I said, before you say anything, can I guess? You'd rather me play the other brother, the second lead. He goes, yeah. I said, me too.
And you got an Oscar nomination for playing Jacob, and
Yes.
that is my favorite performance of yours.
I
Truly.
liked that one a lot.
It's a very special movie.
But in Landman, I saw a guy who had the weight of the world on his shoulders, because that's what a landman has. And it's like you're the guy in between the people who own the oil company, the people who are working in the fields doing it. So your life is just every day a nightmare, but he's a guy who's driven. He wants to make it successful. And
he also
probably,
cares so deeply about their safety.
Yeah,
And he's always trying to tell the other side, like, this, people are risking their lives to do this job, which I really appreciate. I don't think people realize that.
Oh no,
this work.
it's a very, very dangerous business. And so everything about the character appealed to me. And then top it off, you got this crazy family around you who, you know, so every minute of the guy's life, every minute is like it's a nightmare. I mean, it's just like, you know, so what? And then,
It's very relatable, I think. It's a lot of chaos.
Yeah. There is a lot of chaos. And you know, and I think people, you know, really related to all the characters in the beginning, you know, because last year when I guess this year, at the end of January, they come out with some ratings thing. It's supposed to be the global ratings. I don't know what all this stuff is. But at the end of January, we had 2.6 billion viewers in the world. The next closest to us was Squid Games, which I never saw, but it was evidently a big thing. And it
Very different show.
And it
Very
had
different show.
like 1.3. We beat them by 1.3 billion people. And we thought it was going to be successful. We had no idea it was going to do this. Wow. We thought the middle of the country was going to like it. Everybody likes it. I mean, we got fans in Uganda and Japan and Iceland, you know. And
Taylor did a beautiful job with the show, but it's also largely because people love you.
Well, I mean,
I know you're too humble to say that, but it is really so much about you inhabiting this guy that feels so real. It really is truly the magic
I
of
appreciate
that.
you saying that, but
It's true.
I think a lot of the reason that it struck a chord with people is because you got a lead character in a thing who just says whatever he wants to say. And these days you can't say what you want to say about anything. But you can watch this guy just say whatever he wants to say.
So we get to live vicariously through him.
And by the way, the other characters do too.
So in prepping for today, I landed on a very beautiful clip of you talking about how you were forever changed when your younger brother Jimmy passed away in 1988. It's a very beautiful clip. It was actually part of Oprah's masterclass that she did. Right. And I love this sentiment. You said that you had accepted that the feeling of loss will never go away. And you also accepted that you'll only ever be 50% happy. Yeah. And I wanted to know, how do you think that reality for you has impacted your work as an artist? And who or what is making you the happiest these days?
I don't have that great a short-term memory, Stacey. Well, no, when my brother passed away, we were best friends. He was 2 years younger, and we grew up playing music together, and, you know, he was my best friend. He died suddenly when he was 30 years old, 1988. And to this day, I think is funny stuff, and I want to call him, and I forget, you know, just for a second, you know, that he's not here. And I talked to Oprah about it, and more people come up to me on the street now and say that helped them so much through the loss of their mom or their brother or whoever it was, you know. And so those are the things that make it worth it, you know. I mean, when you're in this entertainment business, if you can actually affect people in a way that it helps them in their life, that's when it's great. And you don't get over it. And that was my advice when she was talking to me.
And don't try to get over it.
You don't try to get over it. Right. I owe my brother my grief. You know, people say, well, go to counseling, go to this and go to that. You know, it's like, no, I'm going to grieve my brother forever. I miss him, and that's fine. It's part of my life. And as an artist, you got to have all of the stuff. You know, you don't have to be a pathetic alcoholic living in a little creepy place on Hollywood Boulevard, but you do need some challenges. And so, you know, you got to have every human emotion and condition inside yourself to be a great artist. And so, yes, absolutely, my brother's death gave a lot to me, and I thank him every day for it. And
what is making you happy these days?
Well, the 50% sad, 50% happy, that's just the way I am.
Okay.
I mean, while I'm happy, there's still this thing inside me that's sad. It's like 50-50 all the time, you know, about the world or about people or about someone, a friend, whatever's going on. And today, my family makes me happy. My music, songwriting, touring, my bandmates, the people I work with as an actor, the things I'm doing, it's all one thing to me. Music, movies, the family, which is most important. My kids make me very happy, you know. But now it's like it's really good to be able to be the father to kids that you wished your father had been to you, you know, because you can break the cycle, you know. I mean, his father did that to him, and then, you know, he did it to me. I was going to be the other way around, you know, I was determined to. And so, but yeah, my kids and my wife, you know, and my whole family, my brother and his other brother and his family, that's the main joy of my life. And just kind of like, as I get older, I noticed nature more, and my daughter had a lot to do with that.
Taking a breath and just noticing what's around you.
I wrote a song called Jupiter Man that's on one of our recent albums that we play live. And it came about because a couple of years ago, Jupiter was in something that hadn't happened in 75 billion years or something like that. And I was really keyed up that night, and I was having a real anxiety attack. And my daughter brought me outside, and she said, "Daddy, look at that. That's Jupiter. That's not going to happen. You'll never see that again in your lifetime. So let's just stand here and look at that." And I was like, you know, we stood there with our arms around each other and looked at Jupiter for a long time. And then I was just like, yeah. I mean, you know, there are all these, like, you know, trite sayings about, you know, stop and smell the roses and all these things like that. But it really is, at the end of the day, true that you got to see this magical world we live in, you know. And that's important for all of us. And as artists, it's really important, you know. You need to draw off of that.
Very, very true. And my last question is actually a two-part question. The first part is, what do you hope listeners of this podcast take away from hearing your Hollywood story? What do you hope their takeaway is?
Well, I just hope somebody got something out of it that can, you know, either inspire or help them, or they were entertained by it, or, you know.
They know Hollywood better in LA because of all the landmarks that you've shared?
Yes, that's right. If you ever want to go anywhere, call me, I'll take you.
And then finally, what have you learned about yourself in sharing your story with us today?
That I'm not as anxious when I actually have people to talk to. Aww. Yeah. When I'm alone, I get very anxious, yeah.
Well, we are here anytime you want us.
Okay.
And I'm always honored to speak to you, Billy. Every time I talk to you, and this is like 10 times I've spoken to you, I learn something new about you every time.
Oh,
you're
great.
Such a gift to Hollywood and to everyone who came today. So thank you so much for your
back
time.
at you.
Thank you so
this
much.
girl right here.
Thank you. That's very sweet. My Hollywood Story is a production of Hippolyta Films and Entertainment. It is produced by me, Stacey Wilson Hunt, along with Sonia Slutsky and Wendy Green. Series producers also include Daryl Young and Janet Grayson. Our sound mixer is Luke Tierney, with camera by Ramiro Cantu. My Hollywood Story is edited by Nathaniel Wixon, with original music by Madi Gabriel and Jenny Carr of Moon and Star. Our logo design is by Brad Mitchell, and I'd like to give a special thanks to Champion Turf. My Hollywood Story is sponsored by Mattel Films and recorded at Nei House, Hollywood. If you like what you hear, give us a follow, leave a review, and let us know what you think.